This is the Novel Marketing Podcast.
I'm James L. Rubart.
I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr.
And this is the show for novelists who want to become best-selling authors.
And today we are going to talk about one of our favorite topics in all the world.
You're not talking about RESPECT, are you?
That is what you think of me. Suck it to me, suck it to me, suck it. No, we are going to be talking about... I hope we don't have to pay licensing for that song. We weren't singing it. We were just quoting it. Mr. Copyright Person. All right. No, today we are talking about email marketing and specifically 7 tips for more effective email newsletters.
But first, we're going to talk about... Sing it again, Thomas. Okay, don't sing it.
We are actually going to talk about respect. So here's the deal. We did a whole episode on this a while back, and I think we said it then, but you know what? I'm going to say it again because this is so important. Spam is in the eye of the beholder. The only thing that makes you spam is if the person receiving the email thinks you're spam. So you may be thinking you're sending out great emails and they're valuable and they're funny and they're entertaining and they're talking about the world's most amazing book. But if the person receiving it pushes that button that says mark as spam, what happens is that all of your emails to that person in the future automatically get marked as spam. And it's a vote to their email provider that all emails to that entire provider get marked as spam. So it only takes 1 or 2 Gmail people to mark you as spam, and then suddenly all of your emails to all Gmail subscribers or all Gmail users get marked as spam automatically, even the people who do want to get your email. So the few who don't want to get it can poison it for everyone who does. You see, there's this thin line between creepy and charming. This is one of the things I teach when I'm talking to young people. And now I've written a relationship book. And the name of that line is permission. So an act that is incredibly creepy without permission, it's stalking without permission, it's pursuit with permission. And that is the key to email marketing. Only send emails to people who've given you permission to send them emails. And as soon as they withhold that permission, make it very easy for them to say no. So one of the reasons I don't like Constant Contact is that it is hard to unsubscribe from a Constant Contact email. You have to click a link, then you have to type in your email address, which if you're on a phone and have a long email address is a real hassle. And if your last name is Umstattd, and spelling that is difficult even for people whose own last name it is, not to be specific or anything.
Only slightly easier, Rubart.
Yeah. So, if your last name is Smith, maybe it's easier, but chances are if it's Smith, then you don't have that in your actual email because all the other Smiths took it first. So you have to type it, and then you have to push a button to unsubscribe, and only then are you removed. So much easier to just push the spam button. And so I like email programs like MailChimp, which is free up to 2,000 subscribers, and who should totally sponsor this show, but they don't, because we haven't asked them. But they have a one-click unsubscribe, which I think is the far better way to do it.
And remember, with an email newsletter, you will have people in MailChimp. We're going to talk about MailChimp in a little bit here. But with MailChimp, it tells you who unsubscribed, and often they give a reason why they unsubscribed. So this happens often to me where people will say they've unsubscribed and they give the reason as, I never signed up for it in the first place. Well, the reality is they did sign up for it. It's the only way you can get on my email list, but they still either didn't remember doing it, or maybe it's been a while since I sent one out, so they forgot. But the point is, you need to make it very, very easy for them to unsubscribe. So even if they subscribed, they might not remember it and want an easy way out.
Especially if you don't send out emails very often. So one of the temptations for novelists, and we have quite a few novelists listening to this podcast, is that you only send out emails when you have a new book coming out, which is not a bad strategy. It's better to send out no email than an email where you're not saying anything. But the risk is, if it takes you 3 or 4 years to write a novel, those 4 years, people forget about you. Do you remember the names of all the people of all the books that you read 4 years ago? I sure don't. And so ideally, you have some sort of reason that's interesting for them, because remember, people don't care about you, they care about them. So you need to write an email in such a way where it's interesting for them. So that you can stay top of mind. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So that ends our public service announcement about respect, brought to you by the good citizens of the internet who don't like spam. So if you don't like spam, do not spam unto others as you would have them not spam
unto you.
I don't think that's quite how the verse goes. All right, so tip number 1 is provide consistent value. So, Jim, how do you provide consistent value in an email?
You give them one of five things. You give them entertainment, you give them encouragement, you give them something to rail against.
Sorry, that was my evil laugh. If you want to know why I'm laughing maniacally, listen to our last episode on dealing with people who don't like you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Did I say encourage?
Yes.
Encourage. You give them some kind of education, right? And then the fifth one is you give them a laugh. You make them, smile or see a video or see a cartoon or something that makes them put some joy into their life.
Yeah, emotion. If you're going to go,
Yeah.
if you're going to be a good Baptist pastor and have them all start with an E. All right. So those are very broad words: education, emotion, entertainment. So here are some suggestions specifically for you to do, because we like having a practical podcast here in Novel Marketing World. So we're going to give you some ideas that you can put into practice for your specific book. And the number one thing, the way that you can provide consistent value with your email is, drumroll please, some high end sound effects there. New book announcements. The number one reason people subscribe to your email newsletter, if you're an author, is to find out when your next book comes out, because Amazon is kind of hit and miss emailing you when a author that you read a lot of has a new book out. And Audible, which is what I use rather than Amazon, is very hit and miss. So sometimes I'll be shocked that an author that I love has a new book out 6 months ago that I would have bought 6 months ago if I knew about it. And so a lot of people who are subscribing to your email list want to know when books are coming out. And you can send more than one email. You can get away with 5 typically. Book comes out in 2 weeks is email 1. The second email is book comes out in 1 week. The next one is book comes out tomorrow. The next one is book comes out today. And then you can send another one. The fifth one is whatever results. If you hit the Amazon bestseller list or something, be like, such and such book just was, number 500 on Amazon, or number 1 in such and such category, is a good excuse for the fifth email. And people are okay with that frequency because they know that it's not going to be that frequency all the time.
The next thing you can send out is news. In other words, if you just got your cover in, you can send, hey, here's my new cover. This is what the book looks like. Hey, thanks so much for subscribing to this newsletter. Wanted to let you know that my book is just about done. I've just about finished the manuscript, that kind of thing. The danger here, though, is if it's all about you and there's not something in it for them, like Thomas said, they care about themselves, not about you, then it just becomes, oh, rah, rah, rah for me. So even when you're giving announcements about the cover, about how far you're progressing, this sort of thing, you still want to tie it back into them.
Right. It has to be news that's interesting, not just news, because most people don't care about most kinds of news, and so you have to make it relevant. Another practical way that you can provide consistent value is to ask for feedback. I did this quite a bit with my book Courtship in Crisis, and we had great results. So, for instance, I needed a photo for the back cover of the book, so I went and got a very expensive photo shoot from very fancy photographers, and I came away from that shoot with 4 or 5 photos. And so they took a lot, and I selected 5. So instead of picking which of the 5 went on the back of my book, I put it up for a vote. And I sent it out to my folks on Facebook, and I think I sent it out as an email as well. I'm not sure. And I got a huge amount of feedback. Everyone voted for a photo, and it became one of the more things people were most interested in the book. Like, they didn't care about the book; they just wanted to know if their photo won the vote. And that was like the number one question I got when we were like, the book's coming out, and they're like, "Which photo did you pick?" And so people love having their feedback solicited. I think that it's even more important to do this on a cover. So if you have 2 or 3 different cover options, put it up for a vote, and people then have a sense of ownership. And it's also useful for you because it doesn't matter if you like your book cover. It doesn't matter if you like your author photo. It doesn't matter if you like your book. It only matters if your readers like your cover, your book, and your photo.
What? It's all about them?
I know it sounds crazy, but they're the ones who actually need to buy the book. You can buy and read your own book. But that is not going to change the world. And so ultimately you need to get that feedback from your readers, and they want to give it to you.
One of the other things you can put in there is reviews. Now, it's real easy to take a 5-star review from Amazon and put that in there. I'm not saying that's bad because somebody else is talking about your book, but I'd encourage you to go deeper. And so instead of posting that review, post a quick story about somebody who wrote to you and said, oh my gosh, I was contemplating suicide until I read your book. And then I read your book, and it brought me such light. That's a more powerful review. And I would encourage you not to include names in that. Because you don't want to get sued. But that's a much more powerful review than just quoting something that raves about how great you are or the book is. Go deeper. Go to the emotional level. Thomas, for example, his book that's out right now, Courtship in Crisis, he was talking to me about it, in the last podcast, and these people are writing to him going, oh my gosh, I'm dating for the first time ever. I'm 26 years old. I'm going on dates. This is so cool. That's much more powerful than somebody who says Thomas's book is a must-read.
That's really good. Another thing that you can include is reader art. So the younger your readers are, the more likely they are to draw your book, scenes from your book, characters from your book, and other readers who don't know how to draw would love to see that. And so putting that into your emails is the sort of things that people would love to see in an email. That's kind of fun to look at. They won't look at it long, but again, this is just a way of getting your name in front of folks and reminding folks they'd actually want to open that email. Another thing is reviews for other books. So there's certain authors who I really like Brandon Sanderson, James L. Rubart, but they only put out a certain number of books every year, like sometimes only one book a year or even less. And I read a lot more books than that. And so, and you probably have this too, there's authors who you really like, who you're frustrated they're not writing more books. Well, they can only write so many, but most good authors, in fact, pretty much every successful author I know, reads voraciously in their genre and in other genres, and they often have very good taste. And so if an author who I likes a book, there's a very good chance I will read that book that they like. And so a great thing to do in an email is to review a book in your similar genre. So if you're writing romance and you're reading Christian nonfiction, chances are that your romance readers aren't going to care about the Christian nonfiction a book that you just read. Although if you write a really good review, maybe they will, especially if they're Christian romance readers. But in general, you want to stay within your genre. So if James L. Rubart just read a speculative book, some sort of fantasy book that he really liked, there's a good chance that I'm going to like that book as well. And so reviews of other books can be a great way to both make your subscribers happy and a way to make friends with other authors, because who doesn't like having their book reviewed on somebody else's email?
And that sounds counterintuitive. It's like, why should I tell them to buy somebody else's book? They should be spending money on my book. But so it does feel counterintuitive, but it is not. These people are typically going to be voracious readers, and they will get both books. So do not worry about that.
It's all about the reader. And if you get people into the habit of buying the books you recommend, imagine the effect of when you have a book that you recommend that happens to be your own book. They're definitely going to buy it.
Yeah.
All right. The next thing is advice. So, we know that even though this is the novel marketing podcast, that there are quite a few people who listen to this podcast who don't write novels. They write nonfiction. And you are welcome in the novel marketing tent.
Yeah, we love you.
My book table works just as well for your books as it does for the novelists who write. And so there's one great topic is advice that works particularly well for nonfiction writers. And you can answer reader questions and give advice related to your area of expertise with your book. And if it's good advice, and if your book offers good advice, presumably your emails will offer good advice. People will like to see that, especially if it's answering a question they have wondered in the past.
Another thing you can do is run your own Bookbub. Those of you not familiar with Bookbub, you should educate yourself on it, because it is a tremendous way to promote your books. You actually have to apply to be on their site, and essentially what they do is they send out an email daily that gives either discounted or free books. One of my books, my book Rooms, was put on there earlier this year. I think it was May. And it got to, I want to say, on the Kindle, it got to, in the paid store, something like, 57.
Overall.
57 overall.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that's massively successful. And so you can do that same thing. First of all, you should look into Bookbub if you haven't and see what it would take for you to be able to be in one of their promotions. And it costs to be in it, but what I've found for my own books, it's extremely high ROI. But if you can't get in there, you can do your own Bookbub. You can do a discount on some of your novels in your newsletter and tell people, for a limited time, my book is such and such.
That's really good. The final thing that you can put, a way of providing consistent value, is blog curation. So if you have an author blog which we recommend for most of you. And we have some great episodes on blogging you can check out at novelmarketing.com. If let's say you send out a quarterly email and you are blogging once a week, well, maybe in that quarterly email you have your most popular 3 blogs. So you're curating your own blog to share the kind of highlights. So folks who aren't like super fans of you and don't want to read your post every week, but do want to kind of get the highlights, this allows them to still be in communication. And so you're allowing your super fans essentially to filter the posts for your just regular fans. And that can be a real appeal of an email.
Tip number 2 is...
That was a long tip number 1. That was a lot of... Hopefully that was helpful. If y'all didn't like it, let us know in the comments.
That was the extended version of tip number 1. The rest of the tips are going to be a lot shorter. But tip number 2 is which what software do you use for your email newsletter? And we both highly recommend MailChimp. Thomas, you want to hit just the highlights of why?
Yeah, so MailChimp, what I like the most about it is that it's free for the first 2,000 subscribers. And it typically takes an author a lot longer to reach 2,000 subscribers than it does to reach the next 2,000 to get to 4,000. But the other reason I like it is that it has the best technology. So you can do drip campaigns. You can do, it's easy for folks to opt in. It's easy to add subscribe forms to your website. It integrates with social media. There's a lot of technical reasons, and I'll just say, trust me, it's the best. And pretty much all of the other gurus recommend MailChimp as well. There are others that are good. Aweber is another one that's good, especially if you're very sophisticated technologically. Aweber can be good. I find that MailChimp is easier to learn for a lot of authors. But there's one that you must never use, and that is Outlook. Do not use Outlook or your personal email ever to send out email marketing. One, it's often against the rules, and so if Gmail or Yahoo or whoever finds you doing that, they can ban your whole email account. Or if someone marks you as spam, suddenly your personal inbox has been poisoned. Also, it can be difficult for folks to unsubscribe if you're blind copying them. There's just a million reasons not to do that. We talk more about why not to do that in our episode about avoiding the spam filter. So just trust me, don't use Outlook. I recommend MailChimp, but the other ones that are paid are better than Outlook.
And one more thing about MailChimp, we get a lot of questions of people saying, wow, I signed up for MailChimp, I like it, it's easy to use for a non-techie person like me, but I got to give a physical address, and I'm not that comfortable about giving my physical address out. And a lot of times the simple answer for that is you get a P.O. box.
That's right. And that's not a MailChimp rule. That's a United States Congress rule. This is one of the things of why you don't use Outlook, because sending that email through Outlook without the address in it, illegal. You do not want to break the law. Your book is not something worth going to jail over, especially over the marketing of your book. And so MailChimp forces you to be in compliance with United States law, which is nice. They keep you out of jail. All right, tip number 3 is to use mobile-friendly email design. So for those of you who set up your email newsletter back in the dark ages before the iPhone revolutionized the internet, you're going to need to get a new email template because most emails now are read on mobile devices. This is one of the reasons why email is so effective, why we're such big fans of email, and why it's one of the most effective ways of selling books. It's because people read email in bed. You know, what other kind of marketing can you reach someone in bed? Sometimes the very first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is they check their email, and it's the very last thing they do before they go to bed. It's kind of scary when you think about it, but it's what people are doing, and so you might as well reach them there. So MailChimp, again, makes this very easy. The simpler your email is, the better it is to work on a phone. And just remember, you got to bump that font size. So just because it looks good on your beautiful computer does not mean it will look good on a tiny smartphone screen. So hopefully you have a smartphone. If you don't, borrow a friend's smartphone, send yourself a test email and see how it looks on that smartphone. Again, if you're using MailChimp, it's got a little smartphone tool so you can see in real time, so you can tweak it and get it working right.
Tip number 4 is be consistent. What we mean by this, if you decide to send it out quarterly, send it out quarterly. That's great. If you decide to send out monthly, that's great too. But make sure you have enough content to send out with the frequency you're using. Because what happens a lot of times, people will say, well, I can do it quarterly, and then they start sending it out quarterly. They start looking at their analytics and going, wow, my open rate is really high. This is great. I'll amp it up to once a month. The problem is they don't have enough news or content. Or
they're not once a month interesting. They're only quarterly interesting.
Once a month interesting, and then your open rate starts dropping because people will go, oh, they didn't really have much to say the last 2 times. I guess I can skip that. And so better to have awesome content 4 times a year than have mediocre content 12 times a year.
That's right. And it's better to miss a frequency every once in a while than it is to send out a boring email. So that's one caveat. And so although we got this back when the Author Media newsletter was going out all the time, people really found that helpful. And when we would miss a week, sometimes people would email us and be like, did I get unsubscribed? I don't want to miss the email. And we're like, wow, okay, we'll make sure to not miss a week. But generally that doesn't happen. People don't freak out when you don't send an email. Now, I will say, like I said before, when your book is coming out or you've got a conference coming up that's the focus of your list, you can boost the frequency if you have a good reason. And by good reason, I mean your subscribers would feel that this is a legitimate reason. So if you're an author and your book's coming out, that's a good reason. If you're a writer's conference and the deadline to sign up for the conference, the email newsletters for the conference, yeah, people might be okay with getting 5 emails in 1 week, reminding them about the deadline. So that's what I mean by good reason. You can break the general rule of thumb of be consistent.
Tip number 5 is don't be afraid to experiment. We all know the cliche, don't judge a book by its cover, but people do all the time. People do judge a book by its cover, and they also judge a newsletter by its headline. So there's a way to split test your subjects. Thomas, you want to expand on that a little?
Yeah, so MailChimp allows you to actually make 2 versions of your email, an A version and a B version. And we always do this when we're sending an email out for whatever company I'm consulting with, because we find it to be so helpful. So what it will do, you set the percentage. So let's say it's 20%. So 20% of your subscribers get email subject A. 20% of your subscribers get email subject B. So, like for instance, with Courtship in Crisis, we had Courtship in Crisis releases tomorrow was subject A, and then subject B was Courtship in Crisis unleashed upon the world tomorrow. Something like that was subject B. And we didn't know which would be more effective. One was shorter, but the other one was a little bit more sensational. And so instead of having an argument and, the highest paid person deciding, we put both, and we did a test through MailChimp. And again, this is so easy with MailChimp. And so MailChimp monitored to see which version got opened more often, and then it sent the balance, the 80% who weren't a part of the test, the more effective email. So 90% of our subscribers ended up getting the more effective, optimized email subject, which was is a very easy way to boost your open rate by 5 to 10% by just trying different kinds of subjects. And the other nice thing about this is that it helps you learn what kind of email subjects work for your audience.
Thomas, you can't leave them hanging. Which headline worked better?
The Unleashed. I'm pretty sure it was the Unleashed upon the world. I don't remember exactly the exact words of the test because we test every email. But there's also another cool. This is a bonus tip. But there's a tool online called the Emotional Headline Analyzer, and it's great for blog post titles and great for emails. We'll put a link in the show notes. But you can type in your email subject, and it gives you a score from 1 to 100 of how emotionally resonant that title is going to be for your audience. And it has a computer algorithm, and I find that it's helpful for us when we're brainstorming titles to come up with better words, more resonant, more effective blog post titles and email subjects. And so it's called the Emotional Headline Analyzer. If you just Google it, you can find it, or go to novelmarketing.com and you'll find it. We'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Tip number 6, measure your results. This sounds pretty obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. They start sending out these newsletters, and then they don't look at the analytics. And MailChimp does a great job, even for non-tech.
We've really got to get them to sponsor us.
Yeah, we do. Seriously. But even for non-techie people like me, I can look at the open rate. I can look at all these different analysis when it's opened, hour by hour. It's really very intuitive. And so measure results, but go one step beyond just measuring your results by looking at the data that MailChimp provides. Ask your readers. People like to be involved, and if they like you as an author, oh my gosh, I can shape kind of where this newsletter is going. I can give my opinion. People love to do that. So poll your readers on a variety of things and ask them what they want.
In fact, if you don't know what to put in your next email newsletter, this is a great thing. Create a poll, a free one on SurveyMonkey or on Google Docs, and have that be the email. It's like, what do you want to see from me? And you give people some options and then an other where they can put in, and let your readers tell you what to write in your email. a friend of ours, Mary DeMuth, does this, and she polls her readers not just about what they want to see in emails, but also what form of communication do they prefer. And people actually, of all the ways that Mary interacts with folks online, the number one by far was her emails. People love getting her emails. They love reading them. They love sharing them with their friends, more than her blog, more than her Facebook. And so she would never have known that if she hadn't have asked her readers through a poll.
Tip number 7, and this is maybe the hardest, keep it short. Winston Churchill was once asked how long it takes him to prepare for a speech, and he said, "Well, how long is it?" And I'm getting this anecdote wrong. You probably know what it is, Thomas. But essentially, what Churchill said: if I'm going to speak for 2 hours, I'm ready to go right now. If I'm going to speak for an hour, it's going to take me 20 minutes to prepare. If I'm going to speak for 15 minutes, I'll need 6 days.
Yeah.
And I love that, because the more you hone that down, the more each word has to be precise and not wasted. And yet people will listen to the 15-minute speech much more often, say on a TED Talk, than the one that's an hour and a half long or any kind of speech. So the point here is keep it short and keep it gold. Seth Godin is a master of this in terms of the blogging world, where he sends out, I don't know, his are, sometimes 50 words long, sometimes 25 words long, and yet I get something out of every one of his blog posts. It's very unusual for Seth to do something that's over, 150 to 200 words.
That's right.
And yet I am ready to read him each time. And one of the reasons I'm ready to read him each time is I know it's not going to take me half an hour to read his stuff. So don't be afraid to keep it short.
Have you ever in your life received an email where at the end of the email you're like, wow, that email was so good, I wish it was longer? Has that ever once in the millions of emails or hundreds of thousands of emails you've received in your lifetime ever happened a single time? I'm thinking no. And so the reality is that you almost can't make it too short. And short, as your writers, short writing is harder than long writing. Winston Churchill was exactly right. But it's worth it. And the larger your list is, the more of a responsibility you have not to waste people's time. So think about that. You have 1,000 people, and you were going to write an email that took 10 minutes to read, but you were able to shorten it to 5 minutes to read. That's 5 minutes of saved time times 1,000 people. That's 5,000 minutes. That's over a day's worth of saved. I don't know how many days that is, 5,000 minutes, but it's over a day's worth of saved time that you just saved the economy by spending a little bit of time to write it better. So you have a responsibility for the economy of the world. Okay, I don't want to oversell this. Just keep it short. Edit unto others as you would have them edit unto you.
And speaking of keeping it short, we're going to wrap up this episode by telling you the sponsor of this episode of Novel Marketing is brought to you by my book Table. You can save yourself 10% right now by using the coupon code Novel Marketing. And Thomas, is there anywhere people can go and actually see it in action?
Yes, if you go to courtshipincrisis.com, which is my book that just came out, shameless plug, you can see my book Table in action with the different buttons for the different stores there. And you click the button, it takes you to your store of choice, and you can have that on your website for free, or you can get the pro version 10% off by using the coupon code Novel Marketing at mybooktable.com.
Okay, again, go to novelmarketing.com. Go to my book table and put in the coupon code Novel Marketing. I think I got it.
There we go. We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave us a comment or send us a message on Novel Marketing. If you have a question, we have a Q&A extravaganza coming up here in a few episodes. We'd love to answer your question and feature your book. So let us know, novelmarketing.com.
I'm James L. Rubart with Thomas Umstead, and this has been the Novel Marketing Podcast, giving you novel ideas on how to promote yourself and your writing offline, online, and everywhere in between.